You're listening to the Successors podcast with Kara Oosterhuis on RealAgriculture.com.
Okay, folks, it's time for episode 10 of the Successors podcast. I'm your host, Kara Oosterhuis, and I am so excited to be here with you all, wherever or however you are listening. If you're listening from the truck checking cows, from the sprayer or tractor, or wherever you are, thanks for taking the time. So I know we only have so many hours in the day. Trust me, I know. So I appreciate you using some of that precious time to listen into this podcast. Speaking of time, how is it mid-May already? I always feel like there's something about April where you're like, yeah, okay, spring is coming. And then May hits and it's like you blink and suddenly it's October again. So I'm not trying to be negative here, but it goes by real quick. So try to enjoy it to the best of your abilities. One of the things I truly love about spring is watching my yard come back to life. The grass becomes greener, the trees bud out, and the perennials start to emerge from the not so long ago frozen ground. Oh, and getting the garden in, which I haven't got my garden in yet. I am, hopefully that is, next on my list of the things to do in, like I said, the so few hours in every single day. But there is something so rewarding about having a home-cooked meal and, getting that home-cooked meal out of vegetables that you grew in your own garden. It's awfully rewarding. But anyways, you aren't here to hear me ramble on about my garden. You are here to tune into my latest guest. I have here with me Lauren Martin, who is a lawyer-turned-lobbyist for the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. Lauren, how are things going today?
It's going delightfully. Thanks, Kara. Great to be here.
So tell me a bit about yourself. I mean, I know that's always such a loaded question, but for our audience listening, who is Lauren Martin?
Who is Lauren Martin? Okay, well, right now, I guess I'll give you an image. Lauren Martin is sitting in her office that is located, a home office that is located just outside of Ottawa, Ontario. I am trying really hard to become a farmer, but a joke that I like to make, and it gives you a sense of who I am, is I felt like I had to become a lawyer to afford to be a farmer these days. So yeah, who is Lauren Martin? She grew up on a farm in southern Ontario. Went away to university. I did an undergraduate degree in environment and business at Waterloo, and there the intersection of environment and business is agriculture. So I started thinking and talking about my upbringing there in a academic sense. I went on to law school simply because I was stubborn. If you know me on Twitter, you see that I'm the Ontario ag lawyer, and that is because at that point in time in my life, I tried to brand myself that way, thinking I could service an agricultural clientele. Turns out I didn't like the law part. I still like the agriculture part, though. So I hopped over to Ottawa, where I am. I have since 2017 been a lobbyist in various industries, working on food policy in various different senses. So, quick, who am I? That's me in a nutshell.
So, going back to how you grew up, what sort of operation did you grow up on?
Cash crop. And for the listeners across the country, I felt like it was big, but I know now it's not. So it was 300 acres, really, when I was younger. And now my family has transitioned away to from cash crop to the supply management side of things. So that gives you a sense of, the transition of a small family farm in southern Ontario.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of talk about how you had to become a lawyer to actually end up back in ag. Of course, you kind of talk about what you want to do when you're in high school, things like that. Was ag ever a thought for you?
No, it wasn't. And I've been reflecting on this a lot recently as I try really hard on a 50-acre parcel here to think about what I might do with my own farm. and this might resonate with some of you, it just didn't feel like an option for me. And I say this without cockiness. I say, well, I was told I was smart, so therefore I should go to school. And I think in our generation, university was really pushed on a lot of us. So I went away to university. And truly, looking back, I know that I won't be pushing university so strongly on my kids. I don't think it was the best choice for everybody, at least in the way that it was pushed on our generation writ large. So in high school, no, I was like, okay, I need to go to university. That's what I need to do to be successful. So that's what I did.
So when did was there like an aha moment that you realized that maybe ag clientele was what you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, it was. There was, I guess, once I clicked into the politics of world food. I did a world food politics course in undergrad, and as soon as I found that, I was like, this is what I want to spend the rest of my career. It's so deliciously complicated. There's so many things that you can unpack and uncover, and certainly throughout my career, I found that, I've worked in Ottawa, I've worked for the organics industry, I've worked for the seed industry, and I've worked for the Cattlemen's Association, which is where I am now. And every time I go to a different vantage point, I learn. I feel like I'm starting at ground zero. So the aha moment was in undergrad, but the ahas are continuing pretty much every single day. I don't know. I'm just a nerd for the food system.
So did you end up writing the bar? Did you end up becoming a full-fledged lawyer?
Oh, yeah, I did. Oh, yeah, I really committed to something that I didn't like, full stop. So I jumped from undergrad. I did my law school degree, my Juris Doctorate at Dalhousie in Halifax. And even though I didn't love it, everyone told me that the practice of law would be different than law school. So I hunkered down. I wrote the bar exam, and I practiced for 2.5 years. So really, really not very long. But I did my articles and everything, and mostly I was practicing municipal, corporate, commercial, and real estate. And the aha moment for me there, even though you didn't ask that question, I'm going to tell you, is that in my first year, we were given a mentor or a career counselor. And that career counselor talked about how he was helping everyone do their passions. And so he asked the room, well, what is your passion? And there I was sitting and working on municipal law, and they were asking me what my passion was. And I knew 100% what the passion was. It was agriculture. And I just didn't think I could get to agriculture from where I was sitting in Muskoka at the time, where there's not a lot of agriculture. From where I was. So I knew I needed to make a really big shift.
So do you have any recommendations if somebody's sitting, if an undergrad happens to be listening to this and they're realizing they might not be in a place they love either? Any recommendations there?
Be brave. And I say brave because I think it takes quite a bit of bravery to look at your choices. Look at the career and the path that you've committed yourself to, whether or not you're in second year undergrad and you've spent money and you've told everybody that this is what you're doing, and they're all proud of you and they're happy for you and they want to check in and ask how you're doing. It takes quite a bit of bravery to look that in the eye and say, well, I actually really don't like it and I really want to change. And then the other thing that I would recommend to young listeners or really anyone at any point in their career path is be miserable. Take the time to be miserable and reflect on the lesson that being miserable is sending you. I do always say that the best thing I did was spend a year in the practice of law being miserable and really hating it. Hate's a strong word because honestly it taught me stuff, but disliking it enough and being brave enough to look at those choices and say, okay, fine, it doesn't matter that I spent 9 years getting this designation, getting this degree, spending this money. It's okay because if it's not making me happy, I need to change.
Yeah, absolutely. That is some terrific advice, because I know we've all been there at some point, and we all know somebody who's gone through the whole life, and they're maybe not doing what they love, and you end up, to some extent, being kind of miserable.
Yeah, I guess it's the concept of settling, and it's not to be too airy here with this, but like you really can make your life what you want. And for me, getting to the making my life what I want, it just required being a little bit brave, certainly being critical of myself and my choices. And then the third thing was just being miserable enough to incite that change.
So talk about your shift after you left law and you went to that first agriculture-based job. What was that experience like, kind of hopping back into ag?
Well, it was a bit of imposter syndrome, certainly, and then a bit of authenticity and bringing something to the role. The first role that I had in agriculture at the Organic Trade Association, I was both regulatory affairs and government relations. So I knew that I could really add value on the regulatory affairs side, and the government relations stuff was something I was going to have to pick up as I went along. And I relied a lot on mentors to guide me through that process. I picked out people who I really admired, and I followed them. I asked them what they did, so that was that mentorship piece. But the transition continues now to be humbling. Like I mentioned earlier in this conversation, that pretty much every day is starting from ground zero. So at the Cattlemen's Association, after my return from mat leave, I just returned last week, I'm learning a new file, and that is the domestic ag policy portfolio, where I'm learning about business risk management. And believe me, I'm feeling all the things that I don't know right now. So even though I've been in this industry truly, because another thing I should mention, Kara, is all the way along, although I was lawyering, although I was in school, I still kept the thread of agriculture in some way, shape, or form. Like I worked on research farms during the summer, so I did that. I interned at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. I did that in their legal department just to keep the thread. But back to my point, despite all of those experiences, there's still so much to learn in this complex industry, so I'm still at ground zero, it feels like some days.
Yeah. And talk about that shift, too. I mean, you've had all sorts of, like you said, learning changes all the time, but talk about going from knowing the cropping side to the livestock side, because that's it's all under the umbrella of agriculture, but that's a whole nother plethora of things as well.
Yeah, it really is. And I find it interesting how often that comes up, kind of the dichotomy between crop and livestock, where it gets brought up, but at the same time, a lot of our livestock producers are also crop producers. And then I spent 3 years in seeds, and here I am on the domestic ag side, and we're talking about a lot of forage policies. So, yes, there is this distinction between animals and crops, but it is one of the things I don't like to drum up, because I think that there are enough silos in agriculture, and I'm a huge proponent. I mean, I've said this a million times, just of breaking down those silos. So as much as I'm kind of hit with the difference between the two, I try and downplay it and see the connections between it all.
And that's a terrific way to look at it, because as you said, there are all these silos, and speaking of silos and different ways of thinking throughout ag, another thing you do on the side is you are a part of Do More Ag. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I would really love to, because silos, the word stigma jumps to mind, another S word. But I've been involved with Do More since, I suppose, just 2021. But this year in March, I took the chair role. And they're like, what? Yeah, the world of mental health. I think that Do More Ag has done quite a bit of work reducing the stigma around the conversation. Mental health is now a word on most people's lists, lips. People are comfortable saying the words mental health. So the barrier that I think we now need to push is, okay, well, what are we talking about when we're talking about mental health? Like, let's get specific about this. What are we talking about when we're talking about the mental health of our industry? At what point in time do our producers and the people who support producers, so as well, do more, and even as an industry, we have this focus on the producer, but the producer, the person who owns land, I mean, that is a sliver of what the agriculture industry is. So a thing that we're thinking about as we go forward with Do More Agriculture is how do we support the entire industry? How do we break down those silos? How do we support that farmer on the farm who does feel like he or she is in a silo because they're working alone a lot? How do we support them? And as well, those individuals who work on agriculture, like Kara, you and I. So that's some of the stuff that we're looking at. And then the other piece is that granular piece. When do producers and when does agriculture need mental health support? What kind of mental health support is required? We really want to amplify some of the research that's been done by others and soon to be by ourselves in this space, and we also want to get help to where it's needed and when it's needed most. So in order to do that, here's my plug for anyone listening. We need to hear from producers. We need to hear from agriculture. We need to hear from the supporting structure around those producers to know when and what supports you need. So that's a plug to say, please reach out.
Mental health is one of those things that it seems like everyone you talk to has some sort of connection, whether they've dealt with any difficulties themselves or they've dealt with family members or friends of friends or however it may be. It's something that really hits home for a lot of people. Do you want to tell me a bit about what drove you to getting more involved with mental health in agriculture?
Yeah. As chair, you have to anticipate that you're probably going to get that question. And it's not something I talk about a lot. And not for any reason of stigma, but because I do think that everyone has their own approach to mental health. Like for some people, it's great to share your story. For others, it's not like the best thing. They have a closer network that they like to share their conversations with. And so for me, mental health is important because I've had my highs and lows. When I was practicing law, I talked about being miserable. It was a really miserable time. There was a depressive episode. Let's be specific about it. And it was very unpleasant. I'd never want to go to that dark place again. But and please, nobody quote me on this because I don't know if I have the facts exactly correct. But something that struck me when I was in that time was that adults go through major depressive episodes. I remember it being like, you will go through 3 depressive episodes in your life, like if you're prone to it. And so while I don't want to go to that deep, dark place again, I know that I might. And also other individuals around me, they will have gone through that as well. So it struck me as something that really needs to be addressed. And then we speak so openly. This is not a shock. You've probably heard this before. We speak so openly about, oh, you got a broken arm. Like, did you go see the doctor? Oh, do you have surgery planned? We talk so openly about that. And our brains are also just as deserving of that honesty and that openness in conversation because, it's just another aspect of health.
Exactly. And I totally agree with you there because, as someone personally, myself, I have been on and off medications for all sorts of anxiety and different issues I have dealt with and probably will deal with for the rest of my life. But from people that mean really well and really truly come from a good place, they still oftentimes say, do you really need to be on those medications? And I sometimes wonder, would you be questioning my medications if I had a thyroid problem? Probably not. You'd say, oh, you just take the medication because that's what you need for your body. But there's something about when our brains are not working properly, we don't look at it the same way. Now, when you're looking at talking about it, you said not everyone kind of needs that same approach, and we're all so individualistic on what helps us and what doesn't help us. Do you think sometimes we're trying to get people to talk about it too much? Do you think we're blanket statementing all the time by, saying talk about it, talk about it, talk about it? Or what are your thoughts there?
I think so we talk a lot. My friend group talks a lot about self-care and what self-care looks like. And self-care looks like different things to different people. So in the sense of sharing your story, I think it's the same there as well. If what will give you peace, if what will bring you joy is sharing your story, if what will bring you healing is sharing that story, then by all means, I would love it for this to be a world where there's the space and place to do so. But we do also need to recognize that self-care, like we do in self-care. Self-care for one person doesn't look like self-care for another person, and same with talking and sharing. For me personally, I would like to do the work on mental health, and that's what brings me healing, is actually feeling like I'm contributing, giving back per se. Sharing my own story is not necessarily the most cathartic thing. In fact, I feel like it draws energy from me. The only time I do it is when I'm in a one-on-one conversation with someone who feels like someone who's at the threshold of maybe sharing, or someone who's at like a low point. And I usually find that when I say I really understand, I understand because I've been there. That's when I am usually I can see that I've made a connection, and that's when it usually works. So I guess I would use my story in those one-on-one contexts, but yeah.
And talk about the importance of, of course it's important to lean on your friends, lean on your groups, lean on whatever your support system may be, but talk about the importance of getting that professional help like you would with a broken leg if you're really feeling like you're at a low point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had a therapist for years, like maybe a decade, and they have helped me through various things, not only mental health, not only through a depressive episode, but at various points I've talked to them about career progression. Oh, you're not happy in your job. If you have a therapist, I bet you've talked to them about, oh, I'm not happy with my job. And the space and analysis that they provide you to kind of critically look at yourself, and even a professional development lens. It's stigma reducing work to do there. But the other thing is access. The fact that a lot of people in rural communities don't have access to good therapists. And if you've ever been to one and it was a bad experience, you know what I'm talking about. That can turn you off therapy for a very long time. Because again, it does require quite a bit of bravery to put your hand up and say, I need help, and I'm going to seek it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, unfortunately, one of the problems too when it comes to access is sometimes, I'm not always thinking so much far ahead. I should be, and I know there's other people in this situation too, where suddenly you're like, I need help now. This has gotten bad, and I need some help now. But I mean, you go to public health care, and you're likely it's going to take a long time to get in there.
Yeah. I think, and that's something that Do More is doing. We find we're working on it. We don't have all the answers yet, but we find that to be extremely important work, because when you're at the point of a crisis, you're not going to say, well, why don't I spend an hour Googling and maybe I'll try this phone number, maybe I'll try that phone number, and then you get on to, I don't know, what are you going to get on the other side of the phone? Are you going to get a machine? Are you going to get someone who doesn't understand what it is you're going through? Because the rural lifestyle can look, and certainly the producer lifestyle can look a little different than some other lifestyles. So, yeah, this is something we're thinking about and working on. We don't have all the answers yet, but we seriously need to get the resources into the hands of our agricultural community so that when they're in that crisis, or even when they're navigating something new, they know where to turn. So, yeah.
Have you seen any changes? Obviously, we've come leaps and bounds, but do you see any correlation between age and how we approach mental health?
I mean, anecdotally, yeah, because I don't have the research at my fingertips to answer that question, but anecdotally, I think I'm saying because I actually don't. I'm speaking to you personally, Kara, but I don't have a read on your age. I am in my early 30s, so I think my millennial generation is more prone to talking about things and not letting things fester, for better or for worse. So certainly I do see a generational change. Like, without this cohort of millennials who are fine to talk about the uncomfortable bits, like, I'm not sure we would be where we are on mental health, but mental health doesn't discriminate. It's not a millennial thing. It's a thing in all age groups. And so it's another important point as well. It's like what we're communicating about mental health and how we're getting those resources to different cohorts is going to be different, because they have different needs and different styles of communication. I've done that once. I called a phone line, and the conversation just went nowhere. And honestly, I didn't come out of that feeling good. So I think in therapy, if I could put it in my own terms, having help from people who understand you helps create trust. Like, when you're down and when you need help, you don't really want to sit in that session and try and be explaining things. You just want to be heard and understood. At the base of it, that's the great thing about therapy. You don't have to justify yourself. You don't have to explain anything. You're just there to be heard and understood. So I don't like to think about agriculture as if it's special, because I don't know if that does us. I think that does us a disservice. We can't see ourselves as so far apart from the rest of the population, because if we do that, then we're just going to perpetuate that, that feeling of being misunderstood. So I don't like to say that. Don't hate me for this, but I don't like to say that farmers are special. But at the same time, we do want professionals to understand that way of life so that we can just be heard and understood, and we don't have to explain.
Okay, that's really well said. Thank you very much, Lauren. Is there any other messages you would like to, whether mental health or not, or just, where you've gotten to in your life, any other messages you would like to send to somebody that may be listening? We've definitely done a deep dive on mental health, and I'm glad for the space to talk about it. To reiteration that reach out to the people who you think will be receptive to your concerns. And if that's me, I would be honored to point you in the right direction. If that's someone at Do More, they would be honored to point you in the right direction. If that's really anyone else that you see on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, just do that. First, reach out, and I know it can be hard, and it can be something that requires a lot of bravery. But know that if you did it to me, if I've opened that door and if I've got your trust even a little bit, I'd be honored to talk to you about it. Okay, thank you very much, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to all of you who've tuned into episode 10 of the Successors podcast. We've made it to the double digits, so thanks for listening along and making this possible. It's always so much fun to see your interactions, whether you're emailing or connecting with me on social media. I really do love hearing from you. This is why I do what I do, because I do love having these conversations. Now, if you have any suggestions as well, if there's anyone that you're like, hey, you should have so-and-so on for the Successors. I'm just here to get the information out to you guys, so yes, fire away, send it to me. I am happy to hear all your suggestions. As always, get a hold of me on Twitter at Kara Oosterhuis, and yes, that's OOSTERHUIS, or send me an email, koosterhuis@realagriculture.com. Until next time, stay real, and thanks for listening to The Successors.